Hey everybody, Milkman Al here. Man, after yesterday's patch reveal, I am just absolutely reeling. I think this is going to be a really cool patch with lots of neat features to address, and I'm extremely excited about the self-cast spell buffs that we're going to be seeing. Most of the skills, in case you missed it, have been buffed by about like 45% damage, so a lot of things that weren't viable previously are probably going to come to the forefront now. So, as I've done with previous leagues, I've compiled a few builds that I think will be really strong and really good for league starting. In case you've missed it, I am basically a filthy casual player. I don't have a whole lot of time to play, and my currency supply is limited every league. So all of these builds are going to be really budget friendly. And as of right now, they're totally bare bones. Usually just have like one cheap key piece of equipment and maybe a weapon or something just so you have an idea of what kind of damage output they're going to have. So all of these are sort of like realistic floor cases, like worst case scenarios for what these builds are going to look like in the end game. Like actual damage output will be quite a lot higher. Real defenses and like life and energy shield and stuff like that will be much better. So again, these are sort of worst case scenarios. So before we get into the builds, if you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll really help me out and boost me in YouTube. Appreciate that. So the first build we're going to talk about is what I think is going to be a pretty strong meta build for this league, and that is a Stormburst Inquisitor. So we saw Stormburst all through the reveal yesterday. It was featured multiple times. I think they're trying to push it pretty heavily. Like most of the other self-cast skills, it's been buffed by about 45-50%, something like there in terms of damage. If you've never used it, Stormburst is sort of a unique skill in that when you stop channeling, all of the little orbs that it casts deal damage instantly for each duration that they have left in chunks of 0.4 seconds. So skill effect duration is actually a very big damage multiplier for this skill. Fortunately, there's a bunch of that readily available to the Inquisitor, and I've focused on it pretty heavily in this build. Leveling wise, I would come out here and come around this way and get into the Ascendant area as quickly as you possibly can. There's a bunch of good stuff in here for this build, including these two wheels of skill effect duration. Lots of life, and there's a lot of life on the way, in addition to glancing blows, which will be a nice engine for you to regain life and energy shield via one of the staff masteries, this one, where you basically regain life energy shield when you block. So after you kind of complete these nodes, I would travel up this way and just finish out over here with all of the life energy shield clusters, and this is going to be a really strong build. Along the way, at some point, you may want to grab a Doriani's Glorious Vanity and put it up here so that you have Corrupted Soul. So basically, you're taking damage from both life and energy shield simultaneously and can benefit from both of those regenerations. You could also pick up a Replica Soul Tether for a Corrupted Soul if you don't mind using your belt slot for that. So a couple things to note here. So first off, I've used 123 points. So this character would be a level 100, but clearly that's pretty unrealistic for most people. I just don't really know what to cut yet, so I'm still working on it. Another thing that I really wanted to point out is that I have an Unnatural Instinct available here to slot into the jewel slot that I've gotten in the Scions area. I want you to see what happens when I turn this on. Hey, look at that. It's about 30% damage increase, and I'll show you why. So all of these skills right in here from Area of Effect, which isn't a numerical increase in damage, but it helps with overlapping orb explosions with Stormburst. And the life regeneration is huge, more skill effect duration, also some curse effect. Basically every minor node that you get here from Unnatural Instinct is awesome for this build, but Unnatural Instinct is really expensive, so I wouldn't plan on having that for a while, but just so you know, that's something to work towards. That's a really big deal for this build. And one more thing that I want you to notice is I've gone over here for Spiritual Aid because this wheel right here is a little extra chunk of damage, but also gives you 20% skill effect duration. So with Spiritual Aid, this node here, the Enduring Bond, is actually a really strong option for you because you get 30% increased damage and also 28% skill effect duration. So very good option there. So we visited equipment briefly there. I've chosen to use a Dusk Dawn here, which again might be a little challenging to get at the beginning of the league, but if you can't get that, any decent staff promoting spell damage, lightning damage, whatever you want is fine. Augur Mortis is a great option for this build because you're going to be standing still and channeling, and Stormburst is pretty short ranged. In a second, we'll talk about skills, but I've chosen to use Frostblink for this build, and so you'll be leaving chilling areas all over the place. And enemies in chilling areas are going to take 30% increased lightning damage, which is a huge damage buff. Without these, you do 1,000,000 damage. So it's about 15% or so. Really, really big increase to your overall damage. This amulet's just a placeholder for anointing Potency of Will, which is a skill effect duration node. Fortunately, both of these nodes are very cheap anoints, so you can do either one pretty early on without too much problem. All right, so skill-wise, obviously Stormburst is kind of the star of the show. So I've just gone through and linked it to all of the suggested best damage links, plus increased duration, because as I noted, the increased duration improves your single target damage dramatically. Like I said, I've chosen Frostblink because you can use Frostblink as it is a true instant spell and continue channeling Stormburst. So that's going to help with your clear. Clear might be a little questionable for this build, so any bonus or benefit to that is definitely welcome. Frostblink is a little bit clunky, especially compared with Flame Dash, which would be your other option, but I think that this is going to be probably the best bet because of its interaction with Augur Mortis, and also the fact that it doesn't stop your channeling of Stormburst. So I've linked it to increased area of effect, so the chilling area gets bigger. Hopefully you'll be able to trigger these cooldown recovery scenarios pretty easily, so you don't kind of hinder yourself moving through maps, but we'll see how that goes. You can always switch it for Flame Dash, like I said. Otherwise, just some damage auras. Vitality is really important because that gives you tons of extra regeneration for both life and energy shield. Precision for extra crit, and Summon Ice Golem also for extra crit, and a minion skill to use, so you get that 30% increased damage. Last but not least is Orb of Storm. So Orb of Storms hopefully will help your clear, also will help you basically just deal tons of single target damage. If you want to, you can kind of convert this to a utility skill, like this could be your Source of Curses. You can link Blind to it. Right now it does a fairly respectable 100,000 damage, and that should add to your single target pretty substantially. Oh, and one thing that I actually forgot is you want Sigil of Power. Very helpful for your damage output when you're standing still, which you will be pretty often because you're channeling, and you want to stay near your Orb of Storms. Next, I've got what I think might be kind of an oddball build, but I'm sticking with the lightning theme. I think the lightning skills are going to be very strong in this patch. So this is a Spark Raider. So I've chosen to go very defensive with this. Max out spell suppression and also maximize immunity to ailments. Here we've got Crystal Skin and, immunity to basically all of the elemental ailments. And I've gone out of my way to get immunity to bleeding and poison and stuff like that, which are not maxed out at 100 just yet, but we will figure that out. All of that, of course, comes at the cost of some damage. So if you prefer damage, go for it. So in terms of ascendancies, I've chosen to get Avatar of the Veil. I think that's pretty much a no-brainer. The extra damage from exposure and also the immunity to elemental ailments is clutch. This is the first path that I would go down for sure. And Onslaught helps you with faster casting, also improves your movement speed. And I thought about doing Frenzy Charges, but the damage output just isn't quite as big as I haven't focused on them. Maybe if you want to pick up the Frenzy Charges on the tree, then this is the way to go. But I think the extra Onslaught effect and the attack evasion is the better choice with the setup that I've done. So for leveling, this tree is very straightforward. I think personally I would come out this way, get the evasion mastery, get the extra life and evasion here, curl around, get the elemental ailment immunity, because you'll probably be getting that around the time that you get Avatar of the Veil, and then you just kind of progress up this way. I've chosen to get Corrupted Blood immunity here, also the extra ailment immunity along the way. Now, this is probably the single most important point you will spend on your tree. The lightning damage with non-crits is lucky. This single point is about 30% extra damage. More damage, that is. The way you calculate this is max damage of a skill minus the minimum damage divided by 6. And that's the flat extra damage that you will get. And that works out to roughly 30%, like I was saying. So if you have a look over here, you'll see that my crit chance is terrible. And I have made a point to keep it that way because you want this node to maximize your damage as much as you can. Ultimately, I think going crit is probably a better choice in terms of damage for high budget builds, but this is a league start, so it's not a high budget build at all. It sort of sucks that you have to stretch your tree out so weirdly to get up here. That is definitely something to consider. I think it's worth it for both this and Elemental Overload. Elemental Overload might seem unreliable with a 1.75% crit chance, but you're going to be sending out so many sparks that I don't think that's going to be a problem. If it proves to be, then, maybe you can switch things up and at least take Controlled Destruction off of Spark. So items-wise, all I have are just these two wands. These are pretty decent wands, to be fair, but all they are just spell damage, cast speed. Skill-wise, straightforward again. We've got Spark. I attached Fork to it. You know, hopefully that will help with hitting multiple things and also clear. Control Destruction again, so we don't crit, and that improves the lucky non-crits, as we discussed. Conductivity, Sniper's Mark, so you get projectiles all over the freaking place. Wrath, Grace, and Flame Dash. Pretty straightforward, right? I like it. I think this is a sleeper strong character. The damage isn't amazing per spark projectile, but the defensive capabilities of this build are really good. So I think this might be something that people don't expect to be as strong as it seems. Next up, we've got a nice tried and true build. It's a Fireball, Ignite, Elementalist. Fireball got a huge buff as well, but unfortunately Ignite took a 20%, or what was it, 28% damage penalty. So ultimately, I think Ignite's going to be about where it is. The damage should be roughly the same. Even considering that, I think this is still a very strong build. I've chosen to do Staff Block and also Mind Over Matter for this build with Eldritch Battery. I think that's going to be a nice defensive way to go. Ultimately, at higher investment builds, you're going to want to have Cluster Jewels and add those to this. But again, Fire Cluster Jewels tend to be kind of expensive, so I chose to not use those in this build. Again, pathing is really straightforward. It's all just kind of a straight line down to the Templars area. Wrap around here, get your Mind Over Matter, come down, and you finish your build. There's not a whole lot of finesse to this. Searing Heat is a really strong node that I think a lot of people don't appreciate fully. This is basically 15% more damage over time. If you get a Devouring Diadem, you can actually reshape this tree dramatically. I think you probably don't need Wicked Ward. It might not be a terrible idea, but instead of using all these points over here, you can come through this way and just ignore this and anoint Searing Heat. So as mentioned, Cluster Jewels are kind of the way to go. And these 4 fire nodes here are just extra damage. They're suboptimal. So as soon as you get a Cluster Jewel, I would transition out of this allocation as quickly as possible. But again, otherwise, there's not a whole lot of thought to this tree. I'm going ham on Staff Block this league, apparently. So down here, we're taking all of these nodes here, getting a little life and energy shield replenishment, and glancing blows, so you get that bonus as much as possible. There you go, Fireball Ignite, 700,000 DPS. No big deal. In terms of items, all we've got is a Searing Touch. Searing Touch is probably your weapon of choice for this build. You can probably put together a staff that's better, or maybe a wand shield combination, but that's going to be super expensive and probably won't net you a whole lot of damage. So I would just stick with this. Skill-wise, Fireball with a whole bunch of extra damage stuff on it. I don't know how the added Chaos snuck in there, but it's probably going to be a decent choice, especially given the buffs to damage efficiency that most of the self-cast skills have gotten. Wave of Conviction for exposure and also flammability and combustion. Just damage buffs there for single target. Got Malevolence, Purity of Elements, and Shameful Enlighten. If you don't find one of these early on, just take this off, and you'll be like 5% mana short, I think. Yeah, 5% mana short. So you can just choose one of these auras to not use. Not a huge problem. Flame Dash for movement skill. One thing that you may have noticed is I do not have any Ignite proliferation. That would be a decent swap in for the added chaos damage. But if you can get a Barracks Respite Ring, that's probably the way I would go, honestly. I didn't mention it, but the way I've chosen to go for the Elementalist in terms of ascendancies is Shaper of Flames, which is sort of obvious. Mastermind of Discord, also kind of a given in my opinion. The extra 25% resistance bonus is huge. Bastion of Elements for little extra defense, and Shaper of Storms for shocking. So if you have Barracks Respite, it's going to spread all of your shocks and ignites very nicely. So I recommend that as soon as you can afford it. So next up is a crit Cyclone Assassin. I've wanted to exploit daggers as much as possible, but poison is kind of boring, basically, so I thought I'd try something a little bit different and take advantage of the Vulcanist dagger. That might be a little dicey. I'm not sure how expensive that's going to be, but it was fairly cheap last league, so hopefully that stays true. Otherwise, you might have to use something different. Maybe some elemental damage dagger or whatever. But in any event, what I've chosen to do here is take advantage of the massively awesome dagger masteries, which give you bonus to Nightblade, spell damage suppression, all sorts of cool stuff. and then just max out crit as much as I possibly can. As you can see here, we have a cool 839 crit multi and 100% chance to crit, which is kind of insane in my opinion. Ascendancy tree sort of builds itself. You want Mistwalker for elusive and no extra crit damage, opportunistic also for less damage and more damage dealt, and no reflected damage because you always crit, then deadly infusion for power charge generation, and also more ability to crit. Yay! For leveling, I would make every effort to spec into spell suppression as much as possible early on. I would come out this way, get the spell suppression nodes, get a dagger mastery, and there's one that gives you spell suppression per dagger you're wielding. I would get that early on as well. Basically, visit this part of the tree first, and then I would progress upward, get the power charge bonuses, because I think this is the first ascendancy node that I would go for. Then just fill out your tree from there. You may notice that I only have 119% life, which is suboptimal. That is going to require a little bit of reworking, whether that means coming down this way into the ranger tree and getting a few of the life nodes here, and maybe down this way, or coming to the life wheel. I'm not entirely sure how to solve that. One stopgap measure, since you do have quite a few jewel slots available, is to just use life jewels, and I think that would probably be enough between evasion and spell suppression, but that's cutting it pretty close. At the very least, you'd want probably another 20% life, at the very, very least. But as it is, we're rocking almost 700,000 damage with Cyclone. Looks pretty good to me in terms of damage, especially considering all that is from just 2 Vulcanist daggers. Hopefully you'll be fairly durable in terms of skills. Cyclone with damage mods on it. Anger, flammability, precision, grace for some extra evasion, durability. Herald of Ash will help your clear a fair bit to get stuff exploding, and Blood Rage for frenzy charge generation and also attack speed. So yeah, that build is super straightforward. Basically just spin to win. As long as you can get access to the Vulcanist daggers, you're all set. Now last, but certainly not least, is what I think is going to be my league starter. This is a Blade Vortex Tornado Crit Occultist. So you'll be converting the physical damage from Tornado and Blade Vortex to cold. I think the way to start about this tree is basically get all of your keystones first. So I've chosen to go Mind Over Matter for this build, and also Eldritch Battery again. I really like that for mana sustain these days, since everything is so freaking expensive. I would come out here and actually bridge these 2 nodes, so you can come up, get Eldritch Battery, get Wicked Ward, and there's some really juicy stuff that helps support the build, specifically the Caster Mastery over here that'll let you unleash Blade Vortex. That's a huge quality of life improvement, in addition to a lot more damage, even with the Unleash nerf that's coming up. So once you've taken care of that, I would basically just kind of cruise along the top here, get the power charge nodes here, and keep on rolling down until you run out of points. So very important to note, you need this Cold Mastery in particular. You'll also probably need a pair of Rim Sorrow or Rim Burn gloves to convert more of your physical damage, and you need that last 10% from somewhere. Unfortunately, that's probably going to be from a Watcher's Eye, but you don't have to do that immediately. The converts physical damage to cold while affected by hatred mod on Watcher's Eyes is actually really cheap. But you'll have to wait a little bit for those to actually become available. Fortunately, it's not too big of a damage penalty to not have that. It's like a 10% damage hit, so no worries there. For Ascendancy skills, I would take Void Beacon, Frigid Wake first, and then get Malediction, and then Forbidden Power. So as you can see on the tree, I've spec'd into power charges where possible. You'll probably want to anoint this 3rd extra power charge. Maybe choose more life, because there's not a whole lot of life here, even though I don't think you need it because you're Mind Over Matter. In any event, up to you. I think this is a strong anoint, and it's not super expensive with 2 silvers and a crimson. Items, I've chosen a Disintegrator Staff because 1, it's really cheap, and also Blade Vortex has taken a huge buff in the form of added damage. So now that the added damage is more effective, the Battle Mage, physical damage that this Disintegrator adds is awesome. That's going to be a huge, huge buff to damage. The other option would be use Void Batteries, which have been pretty cheap the last few leagues. You can use 2 Void Batteries, and that would also work very well. Rim Sorrow Goathide Gloves, and the Watcher's Eye. This is actually an extremely expensive Watcher's Eye, so don't pay any attention to that. It's only here for the the Fizz conversion. But you'll see, so damage is 1.07 million right now. If you take it off, it's 1 million flat. So that is not at all a necessity. So skills, Tornado. This is a very, very underrated skill. And I honestly have no idea how this didn't get nerfed, because it is busted as fuck if you choose to abuse it. Blade Vortex. is your main damage dealer, main killer. So how this build will work is essentially you just cast Blade Vortex, and whenever you need some extra single target oomph, you cast Tornado and let your Blade Vortex beat the hell out of it, and go and reflect all the damage to everything around. So that'll mostly be boss situations. So Hatred, pretty self-explanatory. Vortex, that'll be on your left click. I've given it Bone Chill and Unbound Ailments so that you just increase your cold damage around stuff that you're near, and you have a chance to chill it. And that's a nice little defensive layer for things that you're near. Flame Dash, Assassin's Mark, Zealotry, these two Heralds. If you feel like you want more mana, which obviously is an issue, you can get rid of these. But like I said, I recommend getting Eldritch Battery kind of early, so that hopefully shouldn't be a problem, because you'll be spending Energy Shield instead of mana anyway. So there you have it, folks. 5 pretty easy, cheap League Start builds that I think will probably get you through into the endgame without too much problem, so you can actually enjoy yourself without having to dump a ton of time and currency into the game. So if you like these builds, like I said, don't forget to like and subscribe. I will leave Path of Building information for all 5 of them. I'll also link you to the video I did for last league, because I think all of those builds will still be viable, pretty strong league starters as well. So check those out. So folks, once again, I am Milkman Al. Thank you very much for watching the video. Don't forget to come and join me live 8 p.m. Central on Wednesdays and Sundays on Twitch at twitch.tv/milkmanal1. Also, come and join us in Discord if you want to talk about any of these builds or have any feedback for me. I'd really appreciate it. Links will be down below in the description. Thanks a whole lot, guys. Again, I appreciate you watching. Have a great day.